The first time I saw the tow truck idling at the end of my driveway, its yellow lights glinting off the pristine hull of my 28-foot Carolina Classic, I thought it was a mistake. The second time I knew it was war. My name is Jack Sheridan, and I've built a life on the water, a life that Karen Whitlock, the newly minted HOA compliance chair of our sleepy Lakeside Vista community, deemed an eyesore. She called my boat too big, a monstrosity, and a blight on community standards. What she didn't know, what the entire pearl-clutching Lakeside Vista boating and yachting society didn't know, was that the shimmering spring-fed lake they loved to putter around on, every single acre of its shoreline, and the water rights down to the murky, catfish-haunted bottom, belonged to me. And I was about to become the most unpopular and most powerful man in town. The sun was a furious orange ball sinking behind the pines of northern Michigan when I backed the trailer down the gravel slope to my private dock. The Wanderlust, my sturdy diesel-powered haven, settled into the water with a satisfied sigh. She wasn't flashy, but she was solid, a pilot-house cruiser built for Lake Michigan chops, not just the placid 2-mile stretch of Willow Lake. I'd bought her with the proceeds from selling my marine construction business, a retirement gift to myself after 40 years of building docks, seawalls, and fixing other people's nautical mistakes. The house here at Lakeside Vista was supposed to be peace, quiet, a place where the loudest sound was the loon's call at dusk. That peace shattered 6 months ago when Karen and her husband, Todd, a man whose personality mirrored beige wallpaper, moved into the McMansion at the cul-de-sac's peak. The HOA, previously a benign entity that reminded folks to trim their hedges, suddenly morphed into a draconian regime under Karen's fervent leadership. Petunia color, mailbox height, the acceptable shade of tan for trash can enclosures. No detail was too trivial for her magnifying glass. Her focus landed on the Wanderlust like a laser-guided missile. The first notice came in a crisp, legal-looking envelope. Violation, CCNR 12.7 vessel dimensions. Registered watercraft exceeding 22 feet in length are prohibited from permanent docking or storage on lots adjacent to community green spaces. Please remedy within 72 hours. I laughed. My property wasn't adjacent to a community green space. My 5 wooded acres, which included 800 feet of prime lakefront, predated the Lakeside Vista development by decades. My grandfather had bought this land when it was just forest and fishing. When the developer came through in the 90s, they built around me, begging Granddad to sell. He refused, but in a moment of neighborly weakness, he signed a simple easement allowing community access to the lake via a small, shared beach area, with explicit written conditions about maintenance and quiet enjoyment. The HOA CC and RS drafted later held no sway over my original parcel. I fired back a polite email with scanned copies of my deed, the original easement agreement, and a surveyor's map, the property line drawn in unassailable red. Silence. For a week. Then the tow truck. That first attempt was comical. The driver, a kid with a wispy mustache, couldn't figure out how to disengage the trailer's lock. I found him scratching his head. Got orders, sir. HOA violation. Son, I said, leaning on the doorframe of my workshop. That tow truck is on private property. The boat is on private property. You take one more step without a sheriff's deputy and a court order, and you'll be trespassing. And I've already called the sheriff. The kid practically tripped over himself getting back in his truck. Karen was undeterred. The second tow truck came at dawn with more conviction. This driver had bolt cutters. He was met by my lawyer, Sarah Chin, who emerged from her BMW looking like she ate HOA tyrants for breakfast. The legal warning she issued was so frosty I half expected the lake to ice over in July. The truck left. The harassment escalated. Anonymous complaints about noxious fumes. My diesel was cleaner than most lawnmowers. Petitions about wake damage. I idled in and out slower than a canoe. Then the masterpiece, a formal injunction request filed by the HOA's lawyer against me, claiming the Wanderlust was a nuisance and a danger to navigation. The sheer audacity stole my breath. Their navigation consisted of pontoon boats shaped like patios and plastic kayaks from big box stores. The hearing was at the county courthouse, a stuffy room smelling of old wood and older grievances. Karen sat primly in a cream-colored suit, flanked by members of the Lakeside Vista Boating and Yachting Society, a dozen folks in pastel polos and deck shoes, all nodding solemnly. Their president, a pompous retired dentist named Clive, testified about the aesthetic harmony of the lake being disrupted by my commercial-sized vessel. Our turn came. Sarah was methodical. She entered deed after deed, historical document after document. Then she called me to the stand. "Mr. Sheridan, who owns Willow Lake?" she asked. "I do," I said. The room stirred. "Could you elaborate?" "My grandfather purchased the land encompassing the western basin and the entire southern shoreline in 1948. The later development, Lakeside Vista, owns no part of the lake body. They have an access easement for recreational use, granted by my family, under specific conditions which are documented here. I pointed to the packet in front of the judge. Karen's face went from smug to confused, then pale. And these conditions? Sarah pressed. The easement grants pedestrian and non-motorized access to the designated beach area. It also allows for recreational boating on the lake at the discretion of the landowner, contingent on the community maintaining the access path and respecting the landowner's privacy and quiet enjoyment. They violated the latter repeatedly. And have you ever formally revoked this discretionary access? No, I have not. Until now. The judge, a weary man with kind eyes, shuffled the papers. It seems, Mrs. Whitlock, that you are attempting to regulate a vessel on a body of water you do not own, moored to a dock on land you do not own, based on covenants that do not apply. Case dismissed with prejudice. The gavel cracked like a gunshot. Karen looked like she'd been slapped. Clive the dentist sputtered about appeals. But the truth was now a living thing in the room, cold and immutable. I owned the lake. The victory should have tasted sweet. But driving home, seeing the smug Lakeside Vista, private lake access sign they'd erected on my easement path, a slow, burning anger replaced any glee. They tried to take my boat, my peace, my property rights. They'd cost me thousands in legal fees. They saw me not as a neighbor but as a problem to be removed. An idea, cold and perfect, began to form in my mind. It wasn't enough to win. They needed to understand the cost of their overreach. The next Saturday was the Boating Society's annual summer solstice sale and social. The lake would be dotted with their boats. I watched from my deck as they launched from the community beach, laughter and Jimmy Buffet songs drifting across the water. I took a deep breath, walked to the sturdy ironwood post at the head of the easement path where their sign hung, and with a satisfying screech of nails, I attached my own. Notice, pursuant to Section 3B of the Lakeside Easement Agreement of 1992, recreational boating access to Willow Lake is hereby revoked for all members of the Lakeside Vista Homeowners Association and the Lakeside Vista Boating and Yachting Society, effective immediately. This revocation is due to repeated and material breaches of the easement terms, including harassment of the landowner, violation of quiet enjoyment, and attempted impairment of property rights. Access for pedestrian and non-motorized use of the designated beach area remains under review. Jack Sheridan, landowner. Then I called the county sheriff, a friend who'd grown up fishing these waters. Pete, I've got a situation. I've revoked lake access for the HOA. There might be some discontent. The fallout was atomic. By noon, a furious crowd had gathered at the post. Karen was at the front, vibrating with rage, her finger jabbing at my notice. You can't do this. This is our lake. We have rights. I walked down, calm as the water on a windless day. Actually, Karen, I can. You have the right to read legal documents before you sue people. You tried to tow my boat from my property. You took me to court. You lost. Now you lose the lake. Clive spluttered, This is tyranny. We'll fight this. You're welcome to try, I said. My lawyer's number is on the bottom of the notice. But until a judge tells me otherwise, any member of your society who puts a boat, a kayak, or a floatie on my water will be trespassing. Sheriff's deputies will be patrolling. The following weeks were a symphony of Schadenfreude. The sheriff ticketed Clive for launching his pontoon. Karen and Todd attempted a defiant paddleboard excursion and were politely but firmly escorted back to shore by a young deputy in a base boat. For sale signs sprouted like mushrooms on lawns with lake access, now a lie in their listings. The HOA emergency meetings were, according to the one decent neighbor who kept me informed, utter chaos. Karen was voted out as compliance chair, but the damage was done. The coup de grace came a month later. A delegation arrived at my door, not Karen or Clive, but three older couples I recognized as the original homeowners, the ones who'd actually known my grandfather. They looked ashamed. Jack, said one, Phil, his voice rough. We're sorry. This got out of hand. We never wanted this. That easement, your grandfather was a good man. He just wanted kids to be able to swim. I listened. They disavowed the lawsuit, apologized for the harassment, and offered to cover my legal fees. They also, with palpable embarrassment, asked if there was any way to restore access. I looked past them to the lake, sparkling under the summer sun. The wanderlust rocked gently at my dock, right where she belonged. The anger had faded, replaced by a weary sense of ownership. Not just of the land but of the solution. Here's the deal, I said. The Boating Society is dissolved. Permanently. Karen and Clive are never to hold a position of authority related to the lake or the easement. The HOA will formally acknowledge in writing my property and water rights. And you'll remove that damn sign you put up. They agreed eagerly. As for access, I continued, it returns. But not as a right. As a privilege. A revocable privilege. Individual households can apply for a seasonal permit. No commercial gatherings. No loudspeakers. No rules about my boat. And you, I said looking at Phil, will chair a committee to ensure it stays civil. They agreed to that too. It was a surrender, total and complete. The new sign went up the next week. Willow Lake. Private property. Permitted access only. Respect the peace. I see Karen sometimes, walking her perfectly groomed Bichon Frise along the community path, glaring at the water she can no longer touch. Todd put his base boat up for sale on Craigslist. The lake is quieter now. The laughter from the beach is softer, the buzz of boats less frequent. My wanderlust, once deemed too big, looks perfectly at home, a silent sentinel of a battle fought and won. This evening, as the fireflies began their dance over the water, I sat on my dock with a cold beer. The wanderlust's hull was a dark silhouette against the twilight. From across the lake, I heard the gentle putter of a small outboard, Phil taking his vintage wooden skiff for an evening fish. He lifted a hand in a slow wave. I waved back. The war was over. The lake was at peace again, its surface smooth as glass, perfectly reflecting the first stars of the night and the lights of the houses on the far shore, houses full of people who now, finally, understood the simple, unassailable truth that sometimes, the guy with the biggest boat isn't causing trouble. He's the one who owns the whole damn harbor. And he just wants to enjoy the sunset in peace.